I want to introduce Diana Elaine. Diana Elaine is a Palestinian American author, speaker, and trauma informed faith advocate who helps women from diverse backgrounds heal childhood trauma and break generational cycles through faith driven strategies. As the author of Tragic Whispers and the creator of the Tragic Whispers platforms, she draws from her lived experiences to address survival behaviors, faith, and emotional healing with authenticity and compassion. Through her signature message, she equips women with practical tools to move from survival to purpose and from brokenness to wholeness. That was a great bio of Diana Elena, and now we can host a presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dina Lane, author of Tragic Whispers, Secrets from the Heart of a Broken Palestinian American Woman. And I'm here today to talk to you about breaking your silence from the tragic whispers from childhood trauma. Yeah, I'm from a diverse, multicultural, dysfunctional family. My father being Palestinian, my mother being a redheaded, spirited woman from Kentucky. That right there alone set the grounds for a dysfunctional childhood. And what I'm about to share with you is not perfect, but it's real and it's raw. And real is what changes us. We're going to talk about memories and hidden memories and how to trace the root cause of them. So a memory is something that happens that doesn't quite unhappen. Herman Ebbinghaus discovered that memories flow in a pattern, meaning we forget neutral information and we retain a repeated or significant memory. For example, a random Tuesday in the third grade, no big deal. Nobody really remembers that. However, if you were bullied on a Tuesday in the third grade, most of us will remember that feeling, that emotion. And if we were loved, we'll remember the first time we fell in love or we felt love, right? So memories are stored, okay? And if something happens once, it's an event. If it happens repeatedly, it's a pattern. And if you go into what a hidden memory is, Sigmund Freud, he studied how the mind works, and he discovered that hidden memories sometimes pushes painful, confusing experiences of awareness in the back of our mind. So just because we don't remember them, it doesn't mean that they're gone. And later, another scientist, Edward de Bono, he introduced lateral thinking, and that's where we can think outside of the box. We can choose a different response. And when we move deeper, we'll find the hidden memories and past experiences. We might not be actively thinking about them, but they're still going to show up, okay? For example, what looks like work stress might actually be connected to fear or failure. Not pleasing your parents or a teacher could have created that, okay? That's why some reactions feel bigger at the moment. We're not often reacting to just what's in front of us. We're reacting to what stirs it up from the past. So here's the simple truth on how these hidden memories show up. They can show up in different ways: emotional, physical, behavioral, mental, and they stem from these triggers. And a trigger could be, say your boss says, "We need to talk to you about your performance." Well, you might feel that the tone is very serious and your stomach drops and you feel anxious or defensive. And the why is more than likely connected to an earlier experience of criticism, like you're not good enough. Maybe you didn't make the cool kids club, something like that. And that's stored in the back of your mind. So your kids talking back to you, rolling their eyes. Well, you're feeling questioned, okay? So you could shut down and just not pay attention to that, or you could be very sharp in your answer. That's how I was. I was pretty sharp in my answer when my kids did that. So this is how you start tracing your root. You recognize the trigger, and the pattern. And then you're going to trace your root, and that's going to help you find out your why. So let's start with naming the pattern. I told you there's emotional, physical, behavioral, and mental. So with those comes anger, shame, fear, guilt, sadness, depression, your stomach drops, your heart's racing, spiraling thoughts of self-criticism. You know, it's like a script running in your head. Usually it's, I'm not good enough, or what's wrong with me? I always heard that. What's wrong with you, Dina? What's wrong with you? Why do you act like that? Because I was a functioning addict. Yes, my pattern was addiction. I was addicted to cocaine for over 30 years, and I was a functioning addict. I showed up. I had restaurants, I had hair salons, I had 5 kids. Nobody knew until I had to speak up and speak my truth, because I couldn't take these tragic whispers in my head anymore, okay? I had to decipher what was true, what was not, and what no longer served me. And those thoughts replay over and over in your head. So, you know, it can make you a little crazy if you don't dig in and find out. Unfortunately, I was in my early 50s when I finally spiraled and crashed and burned, and I surrendered it all to the Lord. Even though I knew him as a child and rededicated myself in my 30s, I thought that my sins were too big for him. But guess what? His grace is bigger than your sins and my sins. So we think we're reacting to what's happening now, but in reality, we're responding to something earlier in life. Because remember, awareness is the first step towards change, because patterns reveal who we had to become to cope. So recap on triggers and patterns. Triggers are the signal, patterns are the repeated responses, and together that supports what trauma survivors like myself already know. Our earliest childhood trauma experiences don't just become hidden memories. They become the templates for how we think, how we feel, how we survive, and how we show up, how we act. How we act. So let's trace the root, okay? Every pattern has an origin. Our repeated responses did not start in adulthood. They started when something first felt unsafe. So even before you stepped into leadership, whatever that looks like, at work, at home, whatever that is, your nervous system has already developed a leadership style. For example, if you grew up in chaos, then you might be leading with control, maybe a little too much control, okay, a little overbearing. If say you were the middle child, like myself, and basically you were quiet because nobody listened to you. You were unseen, you were unheard as a child. And so now you might be avoiding those hard conversations and you don't speak up. Or you're thinking, you know, I do matter when I'm noticed, so you're going to overwork to prove your value. And that again is your nervous system looking for reassurance. So what protected you then might be limiting you now. Meaning the way you survived as a child may not be the way you need to lead as an adult now. So let's recap tracing the root. When you understand where it started, it stops feeling random and you stop blaming yourself. And you can't change what you don't trace. So clarity begins the moment you look back with honesty and name what's true. And that, my friends, is your why. That is your why you act the way you do, why you have an addiction, why you are a hypochondriac. Okay, this is your why. And we don't need to rewrite our past because we don't need to heal the past. What we do is we heal the past so it stops rewriting us. A gentleman, Buckminster Fuller, okay, he was an architect, American architect, that designed the geodesic dome. That's like the lightweight sphere structures made of interconnected triangles. He believed problems shouldn't be solved in isolation. Everything should be connected. Okay, take animals, for example. They're born to operate mostly on instinct. Humans are not. We learn it, and we learn it early, and then we carry it. So trace the root and you will find your why. Dome. That's like the lightweight sphere structures made of interconnected triangles. He believed problems shouldn't be solved in isolation. Everything should be connected. Okay, take animals, for example. They're born to operate mostly on instinct. Humans are not. We learn it, and we learn it early, and then we carry it. So trace the root, and you will find your why. So if we go to rewriting your narrative, okay, your past may explain you, but it doesn't define you, and it doesn't get to name you. God names you. Awareness is where responsibility begins, and grace will meet you there. Because once you see the pattern, you don't have to carry it alone. You bring it to God. You can surrender it, and that's where your transformation begins. If you look at Romans 12:2, God's talking about not conforming to the old patterns, but being transformed through the renewing of your mind. So renewing the thinking produces renewed leadership. And when God renews your mind, the responses shift, and then your leadership shifts, because the way you respond shapes your legacy. Healing doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you're meant to be. And when you're no longer reacting from old wounds, you're going to lead with clarity. Because once you become aware of the root, you gain the power to choose differently. So when a trigger shows up at home or at work, while you're driving, a movie theater, just take a minute, pause, and think about how you're going to respond. Because you don't know when these are going to show up, but you can determine how you're going to respond to that. Most importantly, choose honesty, especially with difficult conversations, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires you to take responsibility for patterns you've carried. So own your truth, hold your head up high, and lead with confidence. Because when you recognize the root behind the pattern, not just the symptom, you begin to live and lead with purpose and not obligation. With that being said, let me give you just a few tools you can start using today. You can begin with noticing your emotional reactions without judging yourself. Just recognize it. That could be your anger, your shame, your fear, your guilt, why you get sick when you're being called out at work, something like that. Then begin to reflect on the patterns you keep repeating, okay? And the behaviors that show up again and again. Mine I would hear my mother's voice or think of my father marrying me off at age 15, and I would go find some cocaine and use it because it numbed my mind. So simply recognize the patterns for what they are. They're just patterns. You can change them. Take one step towards connection. Share your story. Talk to a friend. Write it down. Talk to your pastor. If you don't know the Lord, I invite you to do so. Best decision you'll ever make. And then lastly, rewrite one belief that you learned growing up into a healing truth that you can live by. Practice leading from awareness, responding intentionally instead of reacting automatically. And believe me, my healing, it didn't come from willpower. It began with my surrender to the Lord. It sure did. And I should have relied on him earlier, but I didn't. But he already knew what was going on. As we say, he knew what time it was. So you can build awareness, you can trace the roots, and you can rewrite patterns. But for me, my truth came through my relationship with Jesus Christ. And just do some reflection and ask yourself, am I living on autopilot or am I living on purpose? What pattern might be shaping your leadership today? Remember, healing your childhood trauma is not about blaming the past, even when anger arises. It's about freeing your future. And your story, it's still being written. So lastly, again, I encourage you to come to know the Lord because his saving grace is just amazing. It has saved me over and over again, mentally, physically, emotionally. You know, I have victory and strength right now. And it is because of the Lord. And it is because I owned what happened. And I'll leave you with Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Dina Elaine. I'd love to hear from you, dinaelaine@gmail.com or dinaelaine.com, or just type in Dina Elaine and my book will pop up, Tragic Whispers. The second one's being released in about 30 days, and the third one is still yet to come. So God bless everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great time at the conference.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Diana. Unfortunately, she is not able to attend the conference, so she shared her recorded session. If you have any queries, please share it in the chat box so we can send to her email. Thank you. Mhm.